Ciao a tutti, welcome to another YouTube video. This time around, I'm going to discuss the Juventus and Milan situation. Both clubs are in similar situations, I would say, at least for the table, because they're both outside the top four, although in different circumstances. And both clubs are expected to make some changes either in the short or long-term future. So I'm going to explain a little bit the situation at both clubs and what could happen next. First of all, as I said, similar situations. We start with the Serie A table, which we can see here now. As I said, both outside the top four. Juventus 1 point below Bologna, 2 defeats in the last 2 games with 7 goals conceded and no goal scored. Milan down 5 points below Juventus and 6 points below Bologna in the top 4. As I said, expect some changes in short term or long term future. I'll start discussing about Juventus in this video. So the previous one, I was in Florence outside the Stadio Franchi after the 3-0 defeat to Fiorentina, a heavy defeat which for the moment has had no consequences because, as Giuntoli said immediately after the game, Motta is going to remain in charge, is going to stay at Juventus, but of course is not something that can last long term if Juventus continue disappointing, if they continue losing games, and pretty much all the media agree that if Juventus don't win the next game against Genoa, which is after the break on March 29, Motta is going to be sacked. Actually, if he loses, for sure, he's going to be sacked, according to pretty much all Italian media. If there's a draw, it remains to be seen what the Juventus situation will be, especially because Juventus, there are 9 games remaining now, but 3 of these 9 remaining games are against direct rivals, so against Bologna away, Roma away, and Lazio away. So Juventus will really need to be at the best of their form to compete with the direct opponents and try to reach the top 4, which is really the bare minimum for the club this season, because they've invested a lot of money across the summer transfer window and the winter transfer window, and so they can't afford not to go to the Champions League. And in the current form, it's very hard to predict the Juventus finishing in the top 4. So Motta, as I said in the previous video as well, would really need to turn things around really, really quickly. But what are the main issues for Motta? I know that there was a meeting between Motta, the players, and the directors immediately after the defeat in Florence. So there was a very quick dressing room meeting. Giuntoli, the Juventus football director, spoke to the team. The players didn't say anything. They just listened to what the director had to say. And then the following day, on Monday, there was a long meeting between Motta, Giuntoli, and Juventus CEO Maurizio Scanavino at Continassa. A very long meeting in which they discussed the current form, in which they discussed all the problems that Juventus face at this time, and all the problems that Motta has to fix at this time. There are a few interesting articles on Italian media this morning, which I want to share with you. And there are basically 2 main issues regarding Thiago Motta and Juventus. You can see the Gazzetta dello Sport articles in here. Juventus under exam, basically Motta under scrutiny, Genoa will be decisive. So Gazzetta confirmed, as I said, that the game against Genoa will determine whether Motta would remain in charge or not. The biggest issue on the pitch, technically, is that Juventus are very fragile. They conceded 7 goals in the last 2 games. They used to be the best defense in the league. Now they are no longer the best defense in the league. And so the first thing that Motta has to recover is defensive solidity. And secondly, which is just as important as defensive solidity, is he needs to restart a little bit with the team. He needs to have a better link up with the team and try to turn things around inside the dressing room and make sure everyone really goes the same direction in order to get better results on the pitch. There is another very interesting article in here with 9 bullet points, as you can see in here, regarding all the issues between Motta and the Juventus players so far this season. It starts with one of the most obvious problems, which is Dusan Vlahovic. He's the best scorer at Juventus this season, but it's no secret that the relationship between Motta and Vlahovic is no longer ideal. And according to Gazzetta, it all started at the start of 2025 when there was a dressing room argument between the pair during the game against Milan in the Supercoppa semi-final. Gazzetta says that there was, as I said, this argument in front of the group when Motta asked a different attitude from Vlahovic on the pitch, but the striker hit back. And then, a few days later, Kolo Muani arrived on loan from PSG. And from that very moment, Vlahovic has basically lost his starting spot. Another issue that has been highlighted by other media as well is the fact that Motta has been changing the captain many times. He started with Danilo, who was the captain from the previous season, but it was never really a starter Danilo. He was never really on good terms with Motta, and so it changed really quickly. Gatti was initially the captain, and then that changed again. Now Locatelli is the captain until the end of the season, but there have been many changes in between. Even McKennie was given the captain armband. Nothing against McKennie, but for example, Gatti was the captain at the beginning of the season when Danilo was on the bench, but then Gatti was dropped again, and then other players were picked over the Italian defender. So there was a sort of lack of clarity on who was the Juventus leader on the pitch. We know the armband, that's what a lot of coaches and a lot of players say, is not really what makes the difference, but it's still important in terms of leadership. So what Juventus needs is to have a certain leader inside the pitch, and probably this is a wider problem, I would guess, because there are no more big leaders inside the dressing room. Szczesny left, Danilo left, and we know Juventus tried to focus on a young team, on a young squad, but on the one hand, they were able to lower the wage bill, lower the costs, but on the pitch, this has had an impact because there are no clear leaders and no, players who can take responsibility and talk to the team when things don't go well. There have been crises at Juventus before. One of the most obvious one was in 2025 after they reached the Champions League final against Barcelona. In the following season, they had a terrible start, but it was a dressing room filled with leaders. So Chiellini, Bonucci, Buffon, they were all able to stand up in front of the team, in front of the rest of the team, and lead by example and show the way. This is not possible at Juventus right now because there are no players with proven experience. And so regardless of the captain armband, it's something that Juventus has to fix in the long term, and probably with summer signings as well. Another issue reported by Gazzetta is the management of Cambiaso. He didn't start against Fiorentina, but the issue with Cambiaso, according to Gazzetta, started before the game against Manchester City. The defenders suffered an ankle injury, but Motta thought it wouldn't take too long to get back to action. On the other hand, the issue was a little bit more serious, nothing huge, but Cambiaso would take longer to recover, and there was a little bit of an issue with the defender on whether he should have returned to action earlier rather than later, and so there were some misunderstandings with Cambiaso as well. The fourth point for Gazzetta is the management of Douglas Luiz, who joined from Aston Villa for 50 million. Then Barrenechea and Ealing Jr. joined Aston Villa, so the actual fee for Douglas Luiz was around 28 million, but we're talking about one of the best midfielder, if not the best midfielder in the Premier League last season, and he has never been close to even being a regular starter at Juventus. He had a lot of injuries as well, but Motta and probably Juventus as well didn't really like the attitude as well sometimes of the Brazilian, so he's been by far a flop signing for the Bianconeri. Gazzetta mentioned Danilo, which I've already mentioned. Fagioli is another player which who Motta didn't really see as a starter. Gazzetta said that he didn't even call Fagioli. They didn't even talk to each other before Fagioli left for Fiorentina in the January transfer window. Perin as well is mentioned by Gazzetta in here. He was apparently promised to have a little bit more playing time at the start of the season. Perin had the chance to leave Juventus last summer and become a regular starter elsewhere, but he decided to stay also because he thought there would have been a little bit of extra rotations. But in fairness, Di Gregorio is the actual starter. There have been no rotations, at least in recent months. So Perin is another player who is not really happy with the management from Thiago Motta. And Yildiz as well is another example of the poor relationship that Motta has with part of the dressing room. There are rumors as well about Yildiz meeting with Yildiz family meeting with Jorge Mendes, who's not the agent of Yildiz, but he's one of the best and most known agents in the world. So apparently he's having a look around to see if there are transfer opportunities for the Turkish talent. He was given the number 10 at the start of the season. He signed a contract extension, but he's one of those players that, especially if Juventus fail to qualify for the Champions League, may need to go on the market, because Juventus would need to get the money they don't get from the Champions League from players that they sell. One last point from Gazzetta is the continuous changes and using players not in their position, which is something that applies also to the first point that we discussed at the start of the video. So the need for Juventus to regain defensive solidity, and in order to do that, they really need to first of all put the players in their positions. Against Fiorentina, a lot of players were played outside position. Nico was used as basically a support striker when he's a winger. McKennie was a little bit on the left, a little bit in central midfield. It was all very confusing. Everything on the pitch has been pretty confusing for Juventus over the last few weeks. So on the pitch, this is the first thing that Motta has to solve. And off the pitch, he needs to fix his relationship with part of the dressing room. And we know he's going to be under pressure for the next few weeks, because Juventus, of course, they return to action after the international break, but they will need to beat Genoa if they want to, if Motta wants to keep his job. Now, the changes here at Juventus compared to Milan are more short-term, because Juventus, they don't want to change, because, of course, if they change coach, it means basically accepting that the project they built over the summer is already over after less than 1 year, and the economic side of things, as I said in the previous video as well, will have an impact, because sacking Motta would cost around 20 million with him and his staff, and so it's something they want to avoid. They really hope they will avoid, but Motta needs to turn things around very quickly. Then there could be some changes within the club as well, but this is something that is going to happen at the end of the season or during the summer, because they will probably need a director which is closer to the team and helping Cristiano Giuntoli in the daily management of the team alongside the coach, whether it's Motta or somebody else. Corriere dello Sport today mentioned Giorgio Chiellini as somebody who could step in. He's already having a role within Juventus, but he could be given a different role, maybe as a general manager, to back and support Cristiano Giuntoli in the daily work, with Giuntoli remaining in charge of the Juventus transfers. But this is a change that will happen not now, not in the next few weeks, but probably it's something that the club is already preparing in the long term, probably during the summer, and it remains to be seen if Chiellini will be the one chosen to get this role and go close to Cristiano Giuntoli for the management, both of the club and the team alongside the Juventus coach as well. For Milan, the situation is very, very different because they have a coach, Conceição. He's under contract to 2026, but Milan can terminate his contract at the end of the season, which is something they will likely do if Milan don't qualify for the Champions League. But first of all, Milan, this is something different from Juventus. First of all, they need a sporting director, which is something that then Juventus already have, Giuntoli, and he's expected to remain at the helm. There are no suggestions that Giuntoli is going to leave Juventus in the summer. Milan, they don't have a sporting director. They have Giorgio Furlani, they have Geoffrey Moncada, they have Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who is actually working from Red Bird rather than Milan, even if he has, of course, a very big role in the decision process within the club. But they need somebody who takes decision in terms of players, takes decision in terms of the new coach as well. So the first step for Milan will be hire a sporting director. We know there have been talks with many candidates, and Iglitare and Fabio Paratici are currently the front runners for the role. I'll show you another article from this morning's Gazzetta dello Sport, which is pretty interesting because there's a comparison between the deals made by Iglitare during his spell at Lazio and the deals made by Fabio Paratici during his time at Juventus. We know Milan, the Milan policy in terms of transfers is very clear. They want to create value and to sign players who then can develop at the club and hopefully be sold for higher fees, which is, to be fair, something that every club in Italy does, because they don't have the financial power of Premier League clubs. So pretty much every club know that if a player really performs well, he'll have to go sooner or later. But this is something that Milan really rely on. And from the Gazzetta article, and the players and the deals they've shown from Tare and Paratici, we can really see the difference between the pair. And maybe there's a suggestion that Tare would be a better option for what Milan have in mind. There are a few signings made by Tare, starting with Hernanes at Lazio in 2010, signed for 13 million and sold for 20 million. One of the most brilliant deals was Felipe Anderson, signed for 8 million, and then after 5 years, he was sold for 38 million. Candreva, before Anderson, signed for 10 million and sold for 22. And then Luis Alberto, who played a very, very important role at Lazio in the last decade, signed for just 4 million from Liverpool, and then he went to Saudi Arabia last summer. The fee isn't huge because it's 12 million, but the impact that Luis Alberto has had at Lazio is really remarkable. There are some stats as well from Luis Alberto in here: 307 appearances with Lazio, 52 goals, 79 assists for 4 million basically. So Tare is not just able to see young profiles, but is also able to, take a look around the market and see who are the players with the best value for money, and be able to get there and sign those players who are maybe not getting enough playing time or are not doing too well in other clubs, but is able to spot their talent and bring them for a low fee, and as it happened at Lazio, make them do big things at the new club. Ciro Immobile made history at Lazio, joined for 9 million and left for 3, but of course the importance of Immobile goes beyond his transfer fee, which was still really, really small, and he became really one of the best players in the club's history, probably the best player at Lazio in the last decade. So you can see other examples of Tare deals at Lazio in here. Correa signed for 15 millions and sold for 31. Muriqi was probably one of his worst deals because he was signed for 20 million, but he really failed to impress at Lazio, and it was sold for just 11 million 1 year later. As for Paratici, he's a different sort of sporting director. We know his career at Juventus started under Beppe Marotta, and then he became the chief football officer at Juventus once Marotta left after the Cristiano Ronaldo deal. But if you look at the numbers of Fabio Paratici, those are very different from those of Tare, because he was working for a different club. He was working at the club Juventus with the biggest firepower in Italy over those years, and so he could deal with a very bigger budget compared to the one of Tare at Lazio. And it remains to be seen, for this reason, if he would be able to adapt to a new reality like the Milan one. A few examples of Paratici's work are here, with Romero signed for 26 million and sold for 20 at Tottenham. Pellegrini signed for 22 million and sold for just 4. Arthur was signed for 72 million in the deal with Pjanic with Barcelona, and he's still under contract with Juventus because he has a very high salary, and so it's been very hard for Juventus to find a new club for him. Kulusevski signed for 44 million and sold for 40 million to Tottenham, and this is quite a strange case because he was signed by Paratici at Tottenham for this fee. So Paratici signed him at Juventus from Atalanta, and then a few years later he brought him to Tottenham. McKennie, 22 million, he's still at Juventus. Rovella signed for 18 million from Genoa and sold for 17. And then there are the Tottenham deals. 25 million for Emerson Royal, who was sold for 13 last summer, clearly not by Paratici because there was still a ban in place for the Italian agent. And then all the other deals with Kulusevski, as I said, it was signed by Paratici at Tottenham. The Romero transfer fee is 20 million because it's the money that Juventus got from his previous club, from Atalanta, and Tottenham actually signed him for 55 million, but the fee that Juventus got from Atalanta was 20 million, because that was the Juventus had a percentage fee on any future sale for Romero, and so this what they got it for this money. Juventus earned that money from his sale to Tottenham. Generally, again, Paratici has been working with different budgets at Juventus and Tottenham, while Tare is accustomed to working with low budgets, which is not necessarily the Milan case, but probably the view that Tare has and the way he's been working over the last few years. It's a better fit for Milan, even if, of course, any decision has yet to be taken. There are other candidates in the race as well. The Monaco sporting director Thiago Scuro was mentioned for Milan. So there are different candidates for the Milan job in terms of sporting director, but this is the first step that Milan will have to do before hiring possibly a new coach instead of Conceição. So differently from Juventus right now, they have a management problem, let's say, with Thiago Motta. They first need to solve that and then see how to continue for 2025-26. And at the same time, Milan, they have the opposite issue because they have a coach who they hired in January. So very likely Conceição is going to finish the season, but Milan will have to hire a new sporting director who Juventus already have before deciding the next steps and go hire a new coach and start a new project for 2025-26. But first of all, the priority for both is try to win as many games as possible in the last 9 and try to qualify for the Champions League. Clearly, if Milan qualify for the Champions League, then maybe Conceição has some chances to stay as well. But again, Milan will surely hire a new sporting director. So a lot of the decisions coming from Milan will depend on the person that Milan pick up as well for this role. This is pretty much everything I have on the Milan and Juventus rebuild. As I said, many common points and a few differences as well for the two teams, but the priority for now is just the pitch. The Serie A resumes after the international break, and in the meantime, the clubs will be working behind the scenes to fix all the problems and try to finish as high as possible. Both sides know that finishing outside the top 4 will be a massive disappointment and a huge blow also in terms of finances. But, Serie A is unlikely to have an extra spot in Champions League like last season. So with the first 3 spots in Serie A, Inter, Napoli and Atalanta pretty much settled, they will be fighting for the top 4 with many other teams. I'll take a look at the table before finishing the video. All these teams: Bologna 53 points, Juventus 52, Lazio 51, Roma 49, Fiorentina 48, Milan 47. So all these teams can still hope to qualify for the Champions League. And this will make a lot of difference in terms of Juventus and Milan in the decisions that the two clubs will take short term and long term. I hope you liked the video. More will come over the next few days. Also regarding Italy national team, with me covering the match from San Siro, Italy-Germany, first leg of the Nations League quarterfinals. So if you want to know more about Serie A and Italian football, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll get in touch really, really soon with other videos. Ciao, grazie.